Aloha mai. Aloha mai oi. And welcome all the Breadfruit people. Thank you for joining us on what promises to be a relational experience at the very least. I am Reverend Kalani Souza, and my grandfather always said, if it doesn't begin right, how will it end right? And so let's begin by centering ourselves with the pule, if you will, a prayer to make sure all of us are safe and sound and with those we love. Mahalo ke akua. Mahalo awa kea. E kani I ka wai. Mahalo. I ka la I nā wahine o ke kai. Mahalo papa honua. E paaina e ola mai. Mahalo ia mahina. Le kuhi mana I ike mai. Mahalo mahina nui. Mai ka po I ke au. Mahalo ia kākou. He mana o pono. He na au. Mahalo. I mele nei. E hulapa. E ho'oponopono. Thank you, great Creator, who stands behind all of creation. Thank you, Father in the sky. Thank you for the Spirit in the water. Thank you to the grandfather Son and to the woman who is the sea. And thank you to the Earth Mother, in whom we all reside. And thank you to the grandmother Moon, who gives us time and tide. And thank you to the great grandmother, who from the darkness of space brings us light. And thank you to all of us for what we think is right and how we feel. And thank you for the song. And thank you for the dance. And thank you for the time to heal. Mahalo ke akua. Mahalo. Thank you, Creator. Thank you. It's so good to be with everyone today. And as my grandfather would always say, the moon is always half in shadow. We think it's going through the phases. We think sometimes it's full, sometimes it's a little sliver. But that's only because of our unique position. If we change our perspective, if we change the way we're seeing it, we would realize that the moon is always, always half in shadow. And this is the truth of our lives. And we must work and apply ourselves to create the best conditions for our communities and our families, even as this truth prevails. And today is no different. We have had news of the sad passing of a dear friend and a supporter of Breadfruit from its inception and his participation. Jim Wiseman, as many of you know, was a very humble person. It may be difficult to find a photo of Jim, but we can certainly find the photos that Jim provided of Ulu, of the Breadfruit, his work and his dedication to what we do And our capacity here in these islands has been unfailing. And we want to take a moment to remember his great contribution. So just a heartbeat or two, if you would, for our dear friend and our ohana who is crossed to the other side, Mr. Jim Wiseman. E ko mako e maku I loko kalani. Mahalo, Father. Thank you for all the spaces. Mahalo ke akua. May it be on earth as it is in heaven. Please give us this day and forgive us. And please help us to forgive. And please, no temptation and no evil. Mahalo ke akua. May we be a blessing to each other. Mahalo ke akua. May you be a blessing to us all. Thank you, Diane, for sharing Jim. And thank you, Jim, for all you are. Mahalo, mahalo, ioi. You know, we cannot do this thing as powerful individuals. We cannot do anything as great organizations or influential corporations. The only thing that ever works is when we do this as family. As family. Committed to the future, committed to the children yet unborn, committed to our Earth Mother, and the proper way to move forward, as our ancestors did in deep relationship with the land, with the sea, with the air, with fire and all that is. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing me to co-host with our hosts and gracious partners also joining us on this call. And let me waste no more time in introducing to you. You know them, you love them. Sometimes get into long discussions with them. The vivacious Mr. Craig Elovich.
Mahalo nui, Kalani. I didn't actually introduce Kalani, but some people are their own introductions. It's impossible to introduce such a powerful spirit. Thank you, Mahalo Kalani. And also, you know, Kalani, there's different dimensions that we're dealing with here. And so, do you think there's another dimension that we should bring in?
Always there is another dimension, always. And, you know, I have this old Polynesian saying that runs around in my brain. My grandfather said, if you want to talk about something, get all the men together. Right, and that being the case, I think since we want to do something, we better get some of that Sina, that Hina energy up into this conversation, Yo.
Yo. So I would like to introduce Auntie Shirley Kauhai-Hau, who's sitting next to me, who's been along in the Ulu project that I've been involved in, and Kalani and Doc Tusi for many, many years, and her whole life has been eating Ulu, living with Ulu. And this whole project, the whole difference in this project that we've done is, I would say, attributed to Auntie Shirley, who is a leader in our community in a very quiet and humble way. I managed to twist her arm to say a few words today. Please.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is really quite an honor. And I'm so privileged to be a part of this wonderful group of people who are trying so very difficult, so very hard to bring breadfruit to the forefront, not only with the people in Hawaii, but throughout the Pacific. Mahalo so very much. I traveled with Craig last few years to various islands across the Pacific, and just visiting and getting to meet people that I was so lucky to be with, I realized that we are on little islands in the middle of this great big pond, and we are all in many ways alike. Our language might be a little different, our customs a little different, but we all share the love for our people, our land, our foods. And I'm so very blessed that I got the opportunity to do that. Also on Oahu at PCC, or Polynesian Cultural Center, and meeting more of those who feel the same as we do. How much more can I say other than thank you? Thank you, everyone. And we will continue to work at making Ulu our very best friend. And I believe Ulu is life. Hola.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui, Auntie Shirley. So I would just like to thank everyone for joining us today, giving up your valuable time to share in this collaborative effort around breadfruit, around sharing, giving back to nature, and building up our local food security, our local food systems, and all of it. It all comes together. And I would also like to thank PFON very much for engaging us in this effort of Breadfruit People. This is the inaugural webinar. And the idea here is to bring people together and share in a fun way what people have been doing, inspire each other, and to kind of kickstart a community that is around breadfruit and sharing in a collaborative way. And so our next speaker is Kyle Stice, who is the coordinator of Breadfruit for PFON, the Pacific Islands Farmer Organization Network. And I would love to have Kyle share about Breadfruit People.
Hola and aloha, everyone. It's great to be a part of this event. When I first began working with Breadfruit in 2005, we were trying to develop a manual for farmers who are wanting to grow and export breadfruit. And we looked around, and it was so hard to find any information about growing breadfruit, harvesting it, handling it, and we really struggled. And then I got a great piece of news that there was going to be a breadfruit symposium happening, and it was going to be happening in our little island in Nandi, Fiji. And I was ecstatic. I was part of the first ISHS Breadfruit Symposium, and I met breadfruit practitioners and researchers from all over the world. And as I continued to work with Breadfruit over the next 10 years, I drew on that network so much. And I was amazed at how many people, as Auntie Shirley said, were working in little islands and little pockets and doing amazing information, but also how we can't access this information. A lot of it's just being done in the farm, sometimes being written up, but only shared locally. And this is really where the genesis of this idea of building a network of breadfruit people. And through efforts by Dr. Tusi and Kalani and Craig and the Pacific Island Farmer Organization Network, this has been evolving over the last 15, 20 years. And we're very excited now, and I think inspired or pushed by COVID and the fact that we are isolated from traveling together, to launch Breadfruit People as a virtual community. So some of the key elements of this virtual community will be our website, which we are currently finalizing, and that hopes to highlight many of the breadfruit champions, some that are part of this webinar, but there are many, many, many others with the hope that we can meet each other, that we can build relationships, we can network. We also have a wonderful collection of resources, some that are very refined and polished, and some that are a bit rough and raw. But these are what the practitioners are contributing to this world of information on Ulu. So we want to bring it all together in one place. But moving beyond that website is connecting people. And unfortunately, this is the way that we have to connect people for now, is through webinars, also through things like social media, and of course, email exchanges. So those are some of the key elements of the Breadfruit People. But any network is only as good as its members. So this is why we're making a call to all of those organizations and individuals who are working in the field, those who are interested in investing in breadfruit, to be a part of the Breadfruit People, join this network, and we can continue to share information with a common goal, as Kalani said, ensuring that healthy, nutritious food is available, that our farming is sustainable, both environmentally, but also commercially sustainable. So we're very excited to launch this first webinar, and I'm excited to see the network of Breadfruit People continue to grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle. That's awesome. And very exciting to have this happen under your guidance. I know it wouldn't be at all. You've been so instrumental in bringing people together in general, and you're so skilled at that. Our next speaker is, before I go to the next speaker, I just want to mention, in this webinar, we have a Q&A section, question and answer section. And so as we're going, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A chat box, not chat, but Q&A, the Q&A box. And write your questions in that section while they're in your mind, fresh in your mind, and we will have a Q&A session at the end after all speakers are presented. So that's one note. And then the chat box is for chatting and talking with panelists and others about your thoughts. The Q&A is for your questions. Okay, now I would like to introduce another icon of the Pacific who really does not need an introduction for most of us. It's Doc Tusi of the Pacific Business Center at Shidler Business College at University of Hawaii. And he is kind of a ubiquitous man in the Pacific around local community economic development, and also working on Ulu for the last 10 years or so, working on breadfruit. Okay, Doc, take it away.
Thank you, Craig, Kyle, and Kalani. I've never been described as ubiquitous, but it really sounds nice. Thank you. I'm with the University of Hawaii Pacific Business Center. It's a university center program that is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Basically, we are a technical assistance program. And what we do is we assist with economic and business development, primarily in the U.S. Pacific territories and freely associated states, in addition to the state of Hawaii. However, I was able to convince our divisional areas that, look, you cannot take only a part of the body and make it work unless all the organs are there together. If these kinds of developments cannot occur unless it's regional in nature, simply because supply scale isn't there. And there's so many small areas that you cannot develop a small area unless it's in close collaboration with other islands that are doing similar things. So what happened in 2013, we approached the Micronesian chief executives. There are 6 governors and 3 presidents of Micronesia, and we tried to get, Craig and Kalani were there, try to get on their agenda because we needed support. We hadn't gotten so much as too much interest, but the Micronesian leaders put us on their agenda, and they unanimously supported a breadfruit initiative. That was so critical because the funding agencies wouldn't support anything that a small teeny weeny little program like ours would. But when the region stepped in from Micronesia, the Breadfruit Initiative was born. From there, we were able to work closely, and the leaders of the Breadfruit Initiative was Craig and Kalani, and later on we were able to bring in Kaitu from Fiji. The significance, they were able to put together a concept that was so compelling that when we submitted it in the National Awards for Universities with Economic Development Programs in 2014, we won the national award. All the big universities had technologies, et cetera, and all kinds of fancy devices. And we came up with a thing called breadfruit. And the first question they asked, what's breadfruit? But we were able to share with them the potential of breadfruit. It's latex, it's fluorescence, it's gluten-free, it's low glycemic index, and also the issues with squalene. They were just blown away, and they have been keeping up. Keep us updated, keep us updated. And then our next major impact was when we met with Python. And that's when another major growth occurred when we were able to collaborate with the Pacific Islands Farmers Organization Network. I'm between 70 and 80,000 farmers throughout Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. That was huge. And I think that added even more credibility. So the issue became, well, is there enough supply? And I said, wait. I don't think supply is an issue. What we need to do is focus on collaboration and cooperation. Everything else will follow. So our primary focus as an economic development and business program is we brought in a dimension that's not part of the College of Business. We wove in traditional wisdom and cultural values with modern science, knowledge, and technology. And we also brought in the spiritual component. And we reminded them, this is how we do things in the Pacific. We have reverence for the sea, the land, the air, and our ancestors. So if all you're interested in planting a tree and harvesting and making money, I'm afraid you need to go talk to somebody else because we're not the people for you to talk to. So we need to make sure that we create regenerative development, not extractive development. And that's simple, following traditional wisdoms. You give back the energies and the materials of the earth so that it can continue to give you through the energies of the trees and its fruits. So we have developed other technologies. We're encouraging holistic thinking. Don't just think of the tree and the fruit. You need to look at oxygenation of the soil. You need to look at water. So we've been working with technologies to able to do that so we can share it with the Pacific. Our job, some people think we're competitors. No, we cannot run a business. That's not our role. What we do is we coordinate subject matter experts, obtain the data, and focus on information sharing, which is the very kind of thing that this is happening right now. I'd also like to call out, we're with the work of Python, with the work of the Micronesians, we've got people that we have been very excited who have been part of this effort. We have Chef Todd in the Caribbean, Ione de Broom in the Marshalls, Dr. Patrick Tilley in Palau, Aufai in American Samoa, Kaitu in Fiji, Seu in Samoa. Dr. Alex Jennings in Swains Island. So we've got all of these people. They're all excited. Thank you, Kyle and the Breadfruit people, for creating the community environment where we can share freely. And lastly, but not least, we are culminating a lot of the seminars that we hope to host every month with a different component with the 2021 Global Summit and Stars of Oceania in Hawaii. We've held it every year. 2020 is the only year we've had to, because of COVID. So we're looking forward to sharing the information, and then you all come here and meet each other, and we're able to also demonstrate many of the technologies that we are currently ready to roll out in a matter of months. Lastly, mahalo to Kalani. He's a constant reminder that we must never, never forget our spiritual underpinnings, our culture, our faith, our people, our heritage. When you, what the word is, gold can blind the soul. So anyway, breadfruit can prevent that. So lastly, favorite quote by Kalani, alone you can go fast, together we will go far. Mahalo, thank you.
Mahalo, 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 Doc. How wonderful. Just checking to see, are you still there, Kalani?
Yes, absolutely. I just, sitting back, listening to all the talk story. I think, I think our best years are ahead of us, everybody. I think we're going to make a real impact on the world. I think it's really going to make a difference, and I'm excited to continue this journey for hopefully the next 10 years, if I'm that lucky.
Right on, right on. I don't see Votausi here. If I'm wrong, please let us know, Votausi. Our next speaker, we're very fortunate to have a seasoned commercial farmer, an educator, and I have firsthand experience, an amazing agroforester with us here from Fiji. It's Levi Tora, and just amazing to see you here. Please share with us what's going on with you and with Breadfruit in Fiji.
Thank you, Craig. While I was thinking about this webinar, I had a bit of structure to it. So before I begin my 2 minutes, I need to acknowledge some people. So I've got so I'll try and stick to the time. Firstly, I want to acknowledge I work with the Breadfruit here back advertisers. Charles, Andrew McGregor, Vincent Labor from Vanuatu, Charles Rogers, Zakau, Valerie Tuya, Samoa, Mary Taylor, of course, Mary Longo, Ulamila, Heiko, I think he's in the Caribbean, Petero Mataratu, Father Petero, thank you for opening your doors, Tutu Rural Training Center, Poasa, I think he's Naulu, he's based in the Marshall Islands, I think. These were all, some people that had helped us at the initial stages of our Manoa Iradola from the Ministry of Agriculture, Roger Goebel from ACIR, of course, Professor Stephen Underhill, Richard Markham was there at the beginning, Rossellini, Shalen from research, Wesa Kimbole, very top-notch nurseryman.
Levi, excuse me.
And of course, the resource owners have to acknowledge them for allowing. Can you hear me?
Levi, yeah, yes, we can hear you. But I was going to mention we can't We can't see you, and you are cutting out a little bit here and there.
Okay, okay. Time. Okay, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, and now
Okay.
we can.
Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Let me just go back to the resource owners. Yeah, just thanking them for allowing in villages, in their gardens, and for across their traditional boundaries. I don't want to forget the value chain, Fiji value chain. As the nursery people, people who try and get breadfruit farms to our market overseas. I'd also want to, just 1 minute, to acknowledge Mr. Domenico Corvembao. So when we started this project, we had to dig into a lot of literature. And one of the earliest literature was Corvembao. Back in 1966, this just characterized 70 of our breadfruit varieties here in the breadfruit project. So we must not forget these people. And of course, partners. Ross in Samoa, David Hunter, Breadfruit beer. That's one of my favorite beers. Yeah, and of course, our partners, Aid and NZ and Australian Aid. So all these people helped develop or help. I just wanted to take those few minutes just to acknowledge them before I begin. So just a snapshot of our industry. Back in 2014, we were able to get some funding from AUSAID through ACR. International Agricultural Research. They basically founded a 4-year project where we were to develop breadfruit commercial orchards, varieties that would work well for export. And so we worked hand in hand with the CPAC, SPC, plus the Ministry of Agriculture and our scientists from ACR. And we came up with some scientific formal trials. And this helped us come up with some good results. We had a high failure rate. So to a farmer, high failure rate is like a waste of money. But to researchers and scientists, you know, it basically gave us a good platform to work on and to motivate us to problem solve. I mean, it's all about problem solving. Eh? And so we, up to this point, I'll just fast track. We had established about 40 odd farmers, commercial breadfruit farmers, and we're down to about less than 5. Like I said, a high failure rate, but a lot of lessons learned. And that's the kind of information I want to share with people as we go on. People who want to set up commercial orchards, people who want to talk about different varieties, different geographical locations, tissue culture, planting material versus bare-rooted versus mark-coated, and we can give you all that information. Today, we have less than 5 commercial orchards that are now producing the fruit that we want, and we will export it. So that was the whole idea of setting up this, this project. And we are happy to say that you know, we've proved the concept, it works. Now we're at the beginning phase to upscale what we've learned. And so one of my questions that I'll be asking later on is where can we get tissue material at a low cost, a high quality material, but low cost. And I think that is the people that want to, if we want to go forward, develop a critical mass for industries, really need to talk about the production. Once we got the production right, then of course, feel free to ask me any questions at a later point. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Levi, for that update. Very interesting. I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of questions. We have a bunch of questions coming in. Remember, as your questions come up in your mind, just put them in the Q&A box, and we'll address those after all the speakers have concluded. Okay, so our next speaker is Longo Wagani Nabete from Fiji. She's the leader for the Genetic Resources Program under the Land Resources Division at SPC. So we're very happy to have her here to speak about what's going on at SPC in terms of genetic material and breadfruit varieties in particular. Okay, thank you so much for being here, Longo.
Okay, thank you, Greg. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks for the opportunity to be part of this exciting webinar. First, I think that this is the first time for me in this capacity to join. Although I have been with the center for many years, I have probably been not focusing on breadfruit, as most of you may be aware. The center really focuses on a number of crops. And we do, before I continue further, I also would like to acknowledge the support from our member countries who have really supported the work of SPC and for the vision to really put together this gene bank for particularly to looking at the conservation of our region's unique biodiversity and looking at plant genetic resources, particularly those for food and agriculture. And I also acknowledge the support of, I'm sure some of our colleagues here at SPC are joining in, and also our director for the support to the gene bank here in SPC. And of course, my former colleagues who have worked with our member countries from the beginning. The gene bank is now around 20 years old. And I thank our former coordinators and program leaders for this genetic resources program of the Land Resources Division of SPC for all the efforts to put together the current, to really pull up the breadfruit collections that we currently have. And most of the work that I'll be, some few updates that I'll be talking about are mostly inherited from the excellent work that was done before by our previous colleagues, namely Dr. Mary Taylor and also Valerie Tuya. From the work of the center, I just want to mention again, just to want to look back again at our own focus as a gene bank and the reason why we were actually set up as a gene bank here for the region is really looking from the enabling side of improving availability, access, and utilization of quality food crops and trees to support food systems, resilient food systems, and of course, food and nutrition security in the Pacific and of course beyond. And in order to do this, we are focusing on advancing regional, national, and community capacities on conservation, development, and the utilization of plant genetic resources, including the development and strengthening of seed and planting material supply networks, just to ensure that the diversity we are conserving are also put to good use for the benefit of our region and of course beyond. So just a brief update on the, our work around conservation. We currently have around a small collection of only around 38 accessions from 5 Pacific countries of Fiji, Samoa, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, and Vanuatu. Both, most of the accessions are in, we have a small field collection here in Suva, Fiji, and we are also duplicating this in our in vitro collections. Some of the work that have also been undertaken includes characterization of these accessions, and of course focusing on the distribution and making this diversity available. Since 2007, we have been able to distribute around 2,000 bundles of around 11 breadfruit accessions to 19 countries, 16 here in the Pacific and 3 from outside of the Pacific. The purposes of these distributions mostly for evaluation of varieties by countries themselves and see which are the best suited accessions for them to use, but also for those that are pretty much familiar with the varieties and they just want for direct use. We also have some distributions, around 5% of the total distributions that were focusing solely on research purposes with some of the universities. And of course, our some of the safety duplication purposes for our safety duplication collection that was initially with the USP Samoa campus. So that's around distribution. And what we have noticed in the last 2 to 3 years is a huge increase in requests from member countries for breadfruit varieties. Initially, since 2007, when the collection was really pulled together following collecting missions, and these collecting missions were mostly supported by the Global Crop Diversity Trust, one of our main partners. Following this, we did not have quite a number of requests, but since the last couple of years, we have very huge requests around looking at thousands and thousands of planting materials. And this is also in alignment with disasters, natural disasters, and efforts for rehabilitations in countries. At the moment, we have around 5,000 planted requests from around 8 countries that we are still working to produce. And an area that the gene bank has not been really putting much investment in is the mass propagation of materials, bearing in mind the number of mandated crops that we are also looking after. So this is a huge task for the team at the moment, trying to meet these around 5,000 planting material requests for that have been coming in. I also would like to just mention some of the projects that we have been involved in, and most of you might have already been aware of these collaborations from the last Breadfruit Summit, where one of our team members had also did a presentation. Normally, our research activities in collaboration with our Fiji partners, Levi was one of them, also Kyle, and really looking at supporting post-harvesting systems, where we had to address the main gap of short supply of planting materials to support sustainable supply chains production systems. And I think under that collaboration, we had that established a really good in vitro mass propagation protocols using a bioreactor system. And this really reduced the time of in vitro planting to field planting period from 44 weeks to 30 weeks. And the materials that also come out of this system was also very good materials that can adjust quickly from in soil conditions. And also the quality and the growth was quite robust for these plants that were produced. So that was a really good outcome of that collaboration under one of the ACR party Breadfruit project. And of course, that work was also carried out mostly by Valerie Tia and one of our research technician, Shandia, who's, I'm sure she's also listening. One of our current collaboration with ACR under a fruit tree project that started in 2016 was also focusing on around post-harvest handling systems for breadfruit, where we are looking at addressing some of the key gaps around harvesting, better harvesting methods for breadfruit. And the key area we were looking at is trying to identify low tree forms that are easy for farmers and for harvesting. So we carried out some intra and inter-specific crafting trials. The results at the moment are still preliminary, but they are looking very positive to with the interspecific property. And also part of this work, we carried out a number of surveys in Vanuatu, Fiji, and Samoa just to identify some of these potential low tree form varieties. I think most of these surveys came out that most of the trees were still very much tall, and none of the varieties except for Ma'afala that came out a bit more has more potential as a low tree form. Just to touch on some of our future focus areas around our Breadfruit work, we're now looking at DNA fingerprinting. We want to DNA fingerprint our collections here at the center, and a work that we're looking to carry out with Manaki Kanua Land Care Research in New Zealand under an NPET-funded project, that Pacific Seeds for Life project. We are currently that's currently underway. Another key area that we're also focusing in is pathogen identification. At the moment, there are no specific protocols for pathogen diagnostics on breadfruit, and we're using next generation sequencing to investigate the presence of pathogens in the breadfruit tissue, and to ascertain if there are any that are of quarantine risk to support our efforts of safe germplasm exchange. And of course, we are also looking at collecting more diversity. We had some potential, some earmarked missions to be carried out last year, but of course, COVID has stalled those efforts, and we're postponing those to next year. And this one is in Futuna, French Polynesia, and PNG are the first 3 countries that we're looking at for our next collecting missions. Another key area we're now also looking at is the cryopreservation, looking at the long-term conservation and trying to improve our long-term conservation strategies, is to try to develop protocols for the cryopreservation of breadfruit. We are currently establishing our own cryopreservation unit with a focus on programs. And of course, the facility will also be used to export for other crops like breadfruit. So I think those are a few key updates from our side for the time being, and I thank you once again for the opportunity. I'm very happy to answer any questions when possible. Thank you.
Vinaka Longo, very interesting how much work you guys are involved in on that. Okay, so let's check in with Kalani. Are you there, Kalani? There he is. Wait, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
My apologies. My trusty technician set up the, oh, you muted me. My technicians are informing me that you muted me on your end. And,
there was some interesting conversation going on there.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
My apologies. So, yeah, we got really great stuff going on. I mean, I'm just enjoying hearing all that is happening. And I suspect that we have much information to rely to the Breadfruit People and the network. And we need to really focus on continuing the networking and the communication and finding ways to outreach and upreach our information and share greater possibilities. I myself am extremely excited about breadfruit's potential, but not as flour, you know, not as ground flour. And I understand that others are very excited about supplying a gluten-free flour to the market, but I'm always focused on jewels and energy resource, and whether it's energy positive or negative. I always consider the top 25% of the harvest should stay right at home and feed our communities, feed our people as fresh breadfruit. You know, there's a lot of talk about vodka production and alcohol production, but the fact is, alcohol is a very necessary part of life, particularly in the medical industry, when it comes to creating medicines, tinctures. A good portion, 35% of our breadfruit that is wasted annually is actually falling to the ground and fermenting and can be harvested and turned into an alcohol product. Can you imagine another product that you can use 100% of the yield, regardless of the state that it's in? I mean, as a farmer myself, I'm excited about something that can do that. And lastly, the idea of the latex, the organic latex from the breadfruit tree being harvested as we harvest maple syrup or other rubber tree products, could create the organic, reusable, and biodegradable plastics for the single-use medical plastic industry. The single industry that is negatively impacting the ocean environments and our food chain. That breadfruit might be the answer to the world's need for plastic, but a need that needs to be handled biodegradably and regeneratively. This kind of look is far beyond dried milled flour. So I think as farmers, we should think about the complexity and the possibilities that breadfruit actually offers. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, mahalo nui. You know, we've heard from some amazing speakers, several of them, and I was going to give a talk on breadfruit agroforestry. Maybe I should just yield the floor and handle questions. What do you think?
I think yes.
Okay.
I think we need to have many more meetings where we disseminate other information about soil quality, about windage, about placement, about seasonality. I saw some questions about seasonality. I think some of the more novice farmers may be unaware that breadfruit actually seasons twice in a year. You know what I mean? That there's a short season and a long season if you're watching the plant, most varieties carefully. So everyone is a student. Everyone is a teacher. You know what I mean? We're all masters. We're all slaves to our communities. So it's like, how do we work together to create the best livelihood in the most generous and regenerative way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, Caitlin has been working on, we have 23 questions here, working on the questions. I think that we've got quite a lot to go through here. So let me just turn over to Caitlin. Let's see here. This is the fun part. Okay, why don't we start with a question for Kyle from, oh, we don't, okay. Hey, Kyle, how does one sign up for the Breadfruit Network?
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, we are in the process of finalizing our website, and there'll be kind of a way to subscribe to the Breadfruit People on that website. But for the time being, I'm just going to ask if you could find us on Facebook at the Breadfruit People. Drop us a message. Also, we have our email, info@thebreadfruitpeople.com, and we will add your name, your email address through social media, and particularly if you'd like to be highlighted, share some of your work, please connect with us either on Facebook or an email, and we'll make sure that that we keep everyone connected. Also, as you've joined or registered for these webinars, you will be connected, and we won't be spamming people with information, but we do want to give people the opportunity to connect. So again, find us on Facebook at the Breadfruit People. You can send an email at info thebreadfruitpeople.com. And we look forward to receiving, you got recipes, you got a resource, a manual, a story, send it through to us. These are the kinds of things that we want to continue to populate. Also, when the website comes live, you'll see that there are links to all the major organizations and groups that are doing work on breadfruit. And we're thankful that so many of them have joined up with this network. So from this website, you can link to University of Hawaii resources, to SPC resources, to permanent agroforestry resources. So we're kind of hoping to be a little bit of a marriage broker and to connect people up. So thank you for that question.
Okay, awesome, Kyle. We got a tough one. Are you ready for a tough one, Levi? This is a tough customer. Levi, why do commercial farms fail with such a high rate? Can you describe, oh, this is a separate one. Let's take that one first. Why do commercial farms fail with such a high rate?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Because one main reason is we piloted this project in the sugarcane belt. So most of these guys were sugarcane farmers. And to transition from your sort of mindset as a sugarcane farmer into planting breadfruit for commercial production, we had these challenges. And so a lot of the failures came from plant neglect. We had the material, we planted it along the periphery of the farms. For the farmer themselves, even though we gave them the best husbandry practices, they weren't following it. They needed to apply supplementary irrigation, regular fertilizing, all the sanitation applications. And this was to plant neglect was a major problem. And from that was the land tenure, had access to the land for long term. And then we found out that the leases, the land that we had conducted these projects at was either not their land or it was a relative's land or something like that. And we just ended up having a lot of confrontation with relatives. So that was one big issue as well, land tenure. And so when you're dealing with breadfruit commercial production, you really have to make sure that you have a long-term lease, because these are long-term crops. Remember, you plant one breadfruit plant today, you'll be there for 3-4 generations. So if you're thinking about 5 years or 10 years, that's not enough. We're looking at about 30, 40, 50 years land lease. So that's another issue that came up. So two big issues.
Gotcha.
And basically the land tenure.
Thank you very much, Levi. We have a few questions here around dehydrating breadfruit and also producing a consistent quality product, a milled flour product. So perhaps you can say some words about that, Doc Tusi.
Tried to find that little button there. Yes, what we did was we were looking at different islands were producing a breadfruit flour. So we were looking at it, and we had some of our food scientists at the university labs look at it. And something I learned is that the different products had different colors. For example, light yellow to dark brown to white. And I says, well, what's causing this? And it said it's fermentation. If there's the slightest bit of fermentation when you're drying it, especially if you're sun drying it, when you pack it, that fermentation will spread And if your flour starts to turn colors, that means the fermentation has become active. And the longer it sits, the darker the colors become, and then the smell becomes rancid. So we wanted to, well, if we wanted to understand about flour making, what we did as a university, we just basically link up with those universities that deal with milling and flour making. So the leading flour making and milling university in the United States is at Kansas State University. They mill over millions of pounds of flour or of wheat every day. So we contacted their lead milling professor, and I call him, in fact, by phone, and his name is Professor Jeff Wertz, and I says, do you mill breadfruit? And he says, what is that? And I said, well, it's a fruit. And he says, look, sir, we're kind of busy. We don't mill fruit, we mill grain. And so I said, well, would you consider coming out? And he says, well, give us some time. So what we did is I told my secretary, put the Waikiki up there on the letterhead and we'll email him. And they said, we're inviting him out to Hawaii for 5 days and to take a look at breadfruit. And within 5 minutes, he says, he accepted. And next thing we know, he was out here. So he looked at the breadfruit. He looked at the breadfruit process. He spent a week out here. And he says the issue is consistent drying and the fermentation process. So we have had him help to advise on how to go about doing that. He's worked with Alex Jennings has already started a breadfruit process in American Samoa using a freight container. And also we're developing a dehydrator here at the university with at the TPOM system. It's called, it converts carbon, carbon. But anyway, these technologies, the one in American Samoa is already producing. We should be rolling out this technology within the next month out of our incubator, our business innovation incubator. So these are, we defer to the experts, and they're advising us, even though they're at Kansas State, but they came out here and studied breadfruit and looked at the process. What we want to do is share that information, and if they're certainly available to assist. We can't go with individual farmers, but we can go through large organizations like Python or from Breadfruit People. That way they can organize training seminars for people. So.
Thank you, Dr. Tusi. Thank you. You know, I sorry to take this opportunity, but I wanted to applaud the efforts to create the large supply that impacts the market. However, I want to caution us not to limit our perspective around both what we produce and create and its viability into the marketplace. And by that, what I mean is the district of bourbon is quite different from the rest of the whiskey that they sell in the North American continent. Bourbon is directly from Bourbon County, Kentucky. You know, once there was only a couple bourbons coming out of Bourbon County, Kentucky, but now there is a plethora of many unique flavors, private brands of bourbon that have unique characteristics, the same way we could have unique flowers from breadfruit, unique products developed throughout Pacific, and the Pacific would be the bourbon of global breadfruit development, but each one of the islands, in fact, each individual farm or a particular commercial product could be created in its own fashion as a unique niche market exportable flour or goods. So I applaud the idea of the large supply. I am worried about monocropping. I'm worried about diseases that occur when we do monocrops, so that's something we want to watch. And I'm worried about this idea of homogenizing species globally. I think diversity is our strength. Thank you. You're muted, Craig.
Mahalo, Kalani and Doc. We will have a whole series of webinars on various topics, diving deep into these subjects. We could have one webinar just dedicated to flour production, dehydration processing, and that kind of thing. And we've had a lot of interest in that, so we could go in that direction. I'd like to break off from the question and answer session for a moment. We're very fortunate to have Votausi Mackenzie join us from Vanuatu. And she is the, one moment. She's the National Agritourism Coordinator, and she's the Managing Director of the Lapita Cafe in Vanuatu. And she is going to talk about value-added products and flour in particular. So how wonderful to have you here and have you join us at this time. So please take the floor.
Thank you. I do apologize to everyone. I was running around and I was mixed up with the time, and then something happened with my internet, but I'm so glad to be here to share with you our small experience on breadfruit flour production. Our business, Lapita Cafe Limited, value adds to traditional food crops. And one of our main products at the moment is cassava flour, which we are well known for producing that in our country. And it's becoming very popular. The breadfruit flour, we did a trial in 2012. And that trial was basically for us to send the flour to the Australian market and to see if there's any potential for the breadfruit flour market. So we trialed about 25 kilos of breadfruit flour, and we sent to Australia to one particular bakery. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name. I was running around all over the place, but he has a chain of cafe, I think restaurants or cafe in Australia. And he tried the breadfruit flour, and it was so good that he came back to us and said, can we produce and deliver to him one container a month? So this is the potential. And then I went back to them and I said to them, this is only a trial. This is only a market research for our company. And of course, in Vanuatu, breadfruit is seasonal, and it's all over the country, from the banks from the north, right down to Anajum in the south. And I said, it is going to be very difficult for us to get enough supply in order to, make these products for you. So that ended there, and I was talking to South Pacific Community, it was commissioned at that time. And they said, okay, we will have a look at all the different varieties of breadfruit that you have. And perhaps you should start thinking about having a farm on breadfruit, like our friend has just said. I think it's a bit, we really needed to see whether it is advantage for us to have monocropping, or to continue to with what we are doing now, is mixing all our crops in our gardens, which we are experiencing, because we're doing that with our traditional nuts. With our traditional nuts, we try to buy like 50 tons a year. And that, it's all about wild trees. It's what they're planting in the garden. So perhaps we could do the same thing with the breadfruit flour. But I'm here just to tell you our experience. And it's a very simple thing to, product for us to be able to produce. What we did was basically, we make sure that the breadfruit is mature, but it's not ripe. okay? It's still firm. And then we peel it, we slice them all up, and we dry them. We dry the slices. After drying the slices, we put them through the mill. Simple, there's nothing added to it. So it's a natural product. And I know that so this is our experience. And if we want to probably explore this further, I think it's really important for us to really think about how do we want to farm the breadfruit? Do we want monoculture? Do we want to integrate this into our products? Because at the moment, what we're experiencing in Vanuatu with our products is everything is intercrops. There's no plantation as such. And this way we can look after the biodiversity of our islands, you know, because we are so small. Eh? So I think this is my little comment that I want to share with you in the midst of so many things I'm doing right now. I hope it's clear. If you have any questions, please, you can ask.
Thank you, thank you. That was just brilliant, really wonderful. Please add any questions you have for Vautausi, and maybe we can go back to the other questions that we had. We've got, you know, a lot of these questions are quite quite to the point and maybe put people on the spot a little bit. But let's go to Longo with, we have a couple of questions about trialing varieties, maybe accessing different breadfruit varieties from different places or your lab, and that kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about access to germplasm, Longo?
Thank you, Greg. Yes, I think the collections that we have and the access mechanisms that we are currently using is under the Standard Material Transfer Agreement of the International Plant Treaty. That's the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. And so it's most of the accessions are already accessible for use. So it's just a direct request to us, and we can check our stocks and see whether we are able to supply, and we can work with the requester to map out timing to send the materials.
There's another question maybe for you, Longo, or Levi, about seasonality, and two aspects of seasonality. One would be the length of the harvest season, extending the length by having different varieties, and also is there a time of year to plant breadfruit that's best to plant breadfruit? And that maybe those are two different questions. So perhaps you could start, Longo, and then Levi can follow up.
Yes, thank you, Greg. We just on this ACR fruit tree, under this ACR fruit tree project that we are currently implementing in collaboration with the University of Sunshine Coast. We are also collecting data on the seasonal fruiting patterns for the trees, the accessions here with us. And we are still collecting that data, but preliminary data shows that different varieties fruit at different times of the year. And so a good strategy will be to select, if you want continuous all year round fruiting, you will need to look at different varieties. That data is not yet fully compiled yet, and we are going to put it under our report for this project before we can put it up, publish it. Yes. So it will be out very soon.
Okay, Levi. Maybe you can answer about time of year to plant. There's also a related question about accessing breadfruit seedlings and starting a trial So perhaps you can address those, Levi.
Thank you. So going back to what Long was saying, we were actually one of the beneficiaries of some of the material that came from CPAC. We were able to access material from the different countries all over the region, and we incorporated them in our trials. And one of the main objectives was to observe and see when was the time for flowering, when was first fruiting, and to collect yield data throughout the year. And we had some preliminary results at the beginning. We were fortunate enough to get some good results. So this is in regards to seasonality. Eh? And one thing we found out from the villagers where we collected some of these varieties from was that they said we were able to access breadfruit from January to December. So we tried to prove that on the field. And we did get about two flushes in a year. But apart from the 2 flushes, we had continuous fruiting throughout the year. So that's what we came up with. Eh? And like I was saying, it's a long-term crop. Unfortunately, it was just for 4 years. Just when the results started to come in, the funding had finished. And so all that work that we had put into collecting data, capacity building, the people to collect the data, it ended there. And that's why the information wasn't able to be collected as we speak. So it's something that we have to push for, because these trials are still there on the field. It's all about getting people to go and collect this data and to come and analyze it, to get a better picture of seasonality, first flowering, first fruiting, and then to get to the point where you're getting yield data, which is very important for us as an export-oriented organization. This will help us with our vision for not only exports but for the processing industry. Eh? We really need a consistency in supply, and that was one of the big objectives: consistency in supply. We were trying to get fruit from January right up to December. And one of the goals was to try out all the material that we got from. Answer that question.
Thank you very much, Levi. I have a question here that perhaps Votausi can address. Is there a mill or equipment that can be designed to produce flour from multiple crops, such as cassava, coconut, etc., like a multi-purpose mill? Maybe you have a little bit of experience since you're also milling cassava.
Yes. A miller, well, what the miller that we're using, we ordered that from China, and what we're using is perfect for root vegetables. Like if you have cassava, and that includes the breadfruit as well, because it gives it a really nice, beautiful, refined flour that we use. But with the coconut, you probably needed something totally different because of the really, it depends on how you prepare the nut. If it's sliced, then it might be easier, but also because of its oil content, you probably needed to look at something totally different from root vegetables, because they are dry, they do not even have that oil content in them, which is the same with when we were trying to produce our, what's this, nut meal, nangai meal. We were trying to use it. It's really hard to use it with the same one. So perhaps it is very simple. All you need is a root vegetable slicer that you can order from China, but order a good quality one. And that can do all the work. It's really simple. And that is from our 30 years experience in this business.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. How about a question for Mr. Kyle? There's a question here about Breadfruit People connecting with schools in the region around education, raising awareness about local food and nurturing consumers. Perhaps you can mention that in the context of Python's broader activities and the Breadfruit People.
Yeah, I think essentially the virtual network of Breadfruit People is meant to connect people, provide information, resources. So we want to be able to help organizations that are working with schools to access the right information, maybe in the right format. We know that traditional information tools, books and manuals, maybe are not targeting our young people the way that we would like. So we're looking for innovative things, and you'll see a series of great videos that we've been finding and pulling together. And those are some things that can be used to attract the young people. So the Breadfruit People as a network won't be directly working with communities or with schools, but in fact, we want to be able to provide access for organizations and individuals so that they can do their work better. And with my PIFON hat on, our particular focus is on farmer organizations or groups of farmers. Mm-hmm. And this is something that a revolution in the Pacific, and we see this as being an important vehicle to be able to really provide support. So the concept of farmers helping farmers. And then where the Breadfruit People complements that is it gives a few more tools for farmers so that they can continue their work. But absolutely fully support any program or campaign that is getting young people aware of the fruit, how to eat it, the important cultural and food security significance of it. Those are the kind of initiatives that we should collectively be championing. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Well, we're coming close to the end of our webinar, and thank you everyone for hanging in there. This is, I know, an unusually long webinar, but we thought since we have so many people brought together, we should get as much out of it as we can. I think that we will have some closing thoughts from Kyle and from Kalani shortly. I would just like to maybe finally address, we have a couple of questions about the number of breadfruit plants per hectare, and also a question about agroforestry. I'll just give a little pitch for the Breadfruit Agroforestry Guide, which Diane Rigoni and I wrote. And that is a very good introduction to integrating crops as Votausi so strongly recommended, Doctusi and Kalani, and getting going with not just growing breadfruit as a single crop, but as developing a crop portfolio, which strengthens the farmer's position economically, environmentally, and also in the long term looks out after and addresses extremes and climate extremes that are coming. We can talk more about that later, and we will try to address some of these questions. We have a few questions that we didn't get to today, but I would love to have Kyle say a few closing words, and maybe Kyle can mention the date of our next Breadfruit People webinar, and also closing formally with Kalani. So Kyle.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I just want to say how excited I am for so many supporters of the Breadfruit People. And we just want to encourage you all that the spirit behind this initiative is about sharing information, is about working together. And so we want to encourage the organizations, contribute. We will treat all information with the proper reverence and make sure that it is cited, and that we will be pointing you in the right direction. This is not meant to be an organization in itself, but merely a network that brings together organizations and individuals. So please continue to stay connected. It's so wonderful to see our women from the Pacific, Auntie Shirley and then Longo and Vatusi, all of your wisdom and all of your experience. And we just want to take all those lessons to the rest of the world. And for leaders like Dr. Tusi and Kalani and Craig, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for the inspiration to some of us younger people, and we just want to continue to harness that wisdom and that enthusiasm, and spread the word about breadfruit. So we are planning the next webinar for 2 weeks from today. So I believe that's the 22nd, and it's going to be very topical. So focused on a topic to be decided after debriefing from the registration and also from the questions here, but it might focus just on production, or it might focus just on processing. That's kind of how the format will be rolling out in the future. And those that are registered will be contacting you again. Hey, do you want to participate? But to be trying to attract additional new participants to come and to register. And we promise to have the website up and live by the next webinar. And then you can see what's there. And of course, you're going to see that there's lots of gaps. And that's where we're hoping that the network continue to provide great information and inspiration. Thank you.
Okay. Mahalo nui. Kalani, please close us out.
Will do, but I would be remiss without allowing Doc to have a final word. I can't remember when the three of us would chart around the Pacific. If we don't let him have his say so, there'll be something to pay in Haula. Pali, if you would.
This has been great, Kyle, and you know, the only way to move forward has been the way we've always moved forward, and that's moving forward as family. The just for food for thought, we're a university. Our role is to utilize the research arm of our institution to help support what's going on in the field. So just for food for thought, plant protein right now, the major source of plant protein, the market by 2025 is $6 billion. But you know what has more plant protein than all the regular normal list of plant protein vegetables? Ulu. So just keep that in mind. The other thing too, we're always looking at the fruit. Well, guess what? Costa Rica is already planting, I think, square miles of this stuff, of ulu, simply because I don't think the issue is the fruit, but it's the leaves and the fluorescent. Because from the leaves and the fluorescent, they can generate what is called squalene. Squalene is right now, it's high demand for the cosmetics. And the primary source is from extracting from the liver of millions of sharks. So we need to take care of our relative so that we can prevent them from being slaughtered in that way. But then squalene can be extracted from the leaves and from the fluorescence of the breadfruit tree. Well, why is that? Well, guess what? COVID-19 is now looking at squalene as an adjuvant, as part of the research for a vaccine. And also squalene, medical research in squalene is that it has major mitigating impacts on cancer. So other people are looking at the tree far beyond just the fruit. So the other thing too is pesticide. Most of our ancestors used a dried, we call it a fungi, the thing that looks like a hot dog. That's the male flower. When it dries and falls on the ground, our ancestors would burn it to keep all the pests away. Well, they actually did research on that, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Department of Defense, and they found the 3 compounds more potent than DEET in the fluorescent. So again, there's so much potential. Kalani's absolutely right. When this thing really comes, when it hits the wall, it'll make a major global impact. And we haven't even touched the gluten-free, low glycemic index of the flour. It's truly a gift. And to be worthy of that gift, we need to care for it with love and respect, the way our ancestors did. So I'm really excited about this. Thanks, Kyle. Love everybody's input and look forward to the next series of webinars. Mahalo Kalani.
Ready? Thank you so much, Dr. Tusi. You know, I wanted to point out that we are anticipating through our FEMA lens and the disaster management lens a potential collapse in global food market, as well as the ability to transport food in a global fashion. That being the case, and all of our island communities having suffered the capitalistic impacts of monocultured plantations, I think it behooves us to return our communities to diversified regenerative food forests with multiple crops. So I applaud all the thinking we've been hearing today, and I want to invite us all to join again and stay in community with one another as the Breadfruit people, to freely share, open source share our information to create this capacity to care, not just for our communities, but possibly for the world. That being said, let's close out the way we came in, shall we? In a prayer for our health and our safety and for our families and community. Thank you, Father, for bringing us all together in this moment of contemplation, in this moment of acquisition and planning for the capacities of our communities and our families. E ho'omalu I kanalele kākou I ke kūkulu, e ho'omalu I kanalele kākou I ke kai uli. May we all be protected as we travel to the horizons of our purpose. May we all be protected as we sail the dark ocean, the future yet unseen. A blessing on all of us. Keep our families safe, keep our people healthy, keep our hearts light, keep the humanity forward and foremost in all of our thinking. Mahalo, mahalo, everyone. Thank you so much, Craig. Thank you so much.
Mahalo nui, everyone.
Mahalo, Craig.
Mahalo.
Thank you, Tomas.
Aloha, aloha, aloha. Poster, Khalil.
Message from the Marshall Islands, that was pretty cute.
Mm-hmm.